All right. Notice that there's some announcements here. We're finishing chapter 4 today. Tuesday, I had asked a couple weeks ago Justin Nowicki, who is the head coach for esports, if he would come in and talk to us about the program. And he said, yeah, he'd be glad to do that. He's going to come in and he'll use the first part of the period to talk about esports. And I thought it was important that we all understand it, because it's such a great component of sport communication. And then in the second half of the class, we'll get into chapter 5. So next Tuesday, the quiz for 5 is due. There seem to be some questions as to when quizzes are due. Whenever we start a chapter of discussion, that's the day that quiz is due. So Tuesday, we'll be starting 5, and chapter 5 quiz is due then. Then on Thursday, we'll hopefully finish 5. Then the following Tuesday, we'll start 6. And then you got a note from me in regard to Thursday, the 24th. I received an invitation from Jim Rooney, who is the grandson of Art Rooney, who started the Pittsburgh Steelers. He does a free Zoom lecture on a number of topics, and I included that in an email you should have all gotten. And on that day, we will not be meeting here. You can meet anywhere you want, but you need to log in on Zoom and be a part of that lecture. Now, I've invited all those who are not in this class, who are in sport management, to join us, so hopefully we'll have a bigger group. And probably the day before, or 2 days before, I'll receive a Zoom link for you to go to that morning. And it'll start at 8:40, so we'll need to be on our toes and be right with it that day. He's given me some topics he's going to talk about. I'm not sure how long he'll talk about each one, but he has assured us through his communicator that we'll have plenty of time for questions. I guess I'll be moderating the discussion, and so be looking at some of the topics, if you would, and be thinking of some questions. I don't want to be the one asking all the questions. This is for you. Now, if you are thinking about, you'd love to be in a career in the NFL or some professional sport, this is a must-see for you. Well, it's must-see for you because you're in class, and we'll take attendance. But he's going to talk about some interesting things. He's going to talk about the Steelers. Now, whether or not you're a Steelers fan, I'm not, but I'm putting all that on the shelf for now, because this will be an interesting Zoom conference, or Zoom lecture, if you will. Any questions about that? Okay, I also, a late announcement I put up. I'm hoping you're getting all my announcements. A late announcement I put up last night included a couple of invitations from Alex Stewart, our SID, for some help throughout the semester. There isn't a lot going on at home this week, but he did mention some needs that he has. One in particular, somebody who can commit to Twitter on all Wednesday home games. And so if you're interested, you need to see Alex or call him or email him. I included his contact information in that announcement. Do you have any questions for me about anything going on in class, your responsibilities? Those of you who have already completed part of your practicum. I was asked a question earlier, how will this be evaluated? Are there a certain number of points Because if you look at your syllabus, you know that the practicum experience is worth 100 points total. How do you get 100 points? Well, I'm still working on that. Since I can't definitively assign everybody, and we have such a convoluted schedule of sports, we can't just assign everybody every week. So what I'm going to do is be very liberal with my awarding of points. In other words, as long as you've made an effort and you've been involved 2-3 times, and I've gotten reports of it, you're going to get full credit from that. Okay? And we'll talk more about that as we go along. Yes.
I'm a sports manager right now as well. I'm doing a real level council this class as well.
Doing what? Not say it again.
Practice the experience.
Yeah.
Is that so? I have to do that for that same class. Do I need to do double that for this class?
Oh, you have to do it in another class?
Yeah.
Okay, what is it you're doing in there?
So like just working some of the games.
What class is it?
Sports management and football.
Oh, okay. Anybody else in the same boat? Okay. You all wondered that same question? Yeah, you can double up on that. There's no reason why you can't. In certain situations, academically, I'd say no. You know, for example, some people in the past have said, "Hey, I wrote this paper for this class. Can I use it for this class?" No. But in this particular case, yeah, you're getting the experience, and there's not that many opportunities. So yes, double up on it. By all means. If experience is an experience, and I'm sure that what you're doing there is basically what we're trying to accomplish here. Good question. Glad you asked. Anything else? All right. This is about where we stopped last time in chapter 4 on this particular slide. And when you took those of you, most of you, who did the quiz, chapter 4, and you had to match up some of these theories with actual occurrences, you saw 1 or 2 examples on these slides. And let's walk through those really quickly. Even though we did this slide, it will help us segue into the next one. And notice that here's one of the popular theories is the powerful effects theory. In other words, the person who is such a presence that regardless of what he or she says, it's not so much the message as it is, well, no, it is. You're convinced by the overall persuading power of the message. So it may not be necessarily the person, but it's the dynamic message that comes across. And that I would say that would have to be a pretty articulated message in order for a person to. I think one of the examples I may have given last week was maybe the Reverend Jim Jones, who convinced all these people to immigrate from the U.S. to Guyana, and then they had this mass suicide. Now he was obviously a charismatic individual, but he had a message that apparently was just you couldn't resist it. Now, on the other hand, here's another example. Billy Graham, the late Billy Graham. If you watch any tapes of his former crusades, you'll know that it's not about him. He gives the same basic message, evangelical message, every time, and the message is so compelling. If you have ever seen one of his tapes, he ends just about every message by saying, "Now I want hundreds of you. I want hundreds of you to come forward and give your hearts to Christ." And he says it in such a way and it's so compelling that it's difficult for those who the Spirit is working on to resist. Uses and gratifications. This is where the message is given in such a way that you see, man, I have a need here. I need to get this. And does anybody know what as you watch advertisements on TV, what category of advertisements do we see most on TV? What is advertised most on TV? Anybody know? Give me a guess.
Food.
Huh?
Food.
Food. That's a good guess. That's up there, but that's not the one. What else would you guess? Cars. Exactly. Cars and trucks. And if you'll notice, when they're advertised, you know, the marketers target people when they know they're going to be watching. So if you watch the evening news, they know that there are adults watching the news, and they may have been convinced that there are upwardly mobile people watching who may have disposable income, and so you're going to see this car ad, and you're going to, man, those features, I got to have those features. So that's an example of this uses and gratification. And we talked about the two-step flow theory. One is the message offers a better way of doing things, and then by information, that's where you're convinced more by the individual who delivers the message. And we use the example of Michael Jordan. Has anybody seen the series Last Dance? It's the Michael Jordan. Okay, we just got through watching the 10th episode the other night. And there's 10 episodes, they're about an hour each. And if you have Netflix, that's where it's at. And came away realizing that Michael Jordan is just bigger than almost, you know, he's an empire unto himself. You can understand after watching this why, if what he advertises is the least bit attractive, it's the personality that's going to convince you. Now, I came away from it not being more of a Michael Jordan fan. I mean, I was a fan, but not a great fan, and I'm less of a fan after watching it. Actually, he comes across as very arrogant. Now, granted, he's the best basketball player ever. You know, maybe LeBron will have the last word on that, but you know, he's the best ever. But he knows it, and he flaunts it. But that's all I'll say about that. That's, you know, you can make your own conclusions on that. Now, here's some other popular theories: the parasocial and circumsocial. The parasocial is where you actually develop relationships with individuals through the media. For example, if you read an editorial and you write back, and that person publishes your letter, and you write back again, and pretty soon you think, man, I've got a bit of a relationship with this guy. And really, he's getting hundreds of letters every day, and you don't really have that big a relationship, but that's the theory. But then the second part, the circumsocial, you believe a relationship exists with media persona because of some degree of back and forth messaging. Maybe that one is a little bit more where we want to leave the editorial, and then the first one is more where you are, the example I give here is, anybody ever watch Ninja Warrior? Come on, admit it if you watch it, okay. Ninja American Warrior, or American Ninja Warrior. One of the personalities on there, Jessie Graff, she is one of the most likable competitors on there. And she's always smiling, she's a really good competitor, and there's just something about her personality that people like. And so they interview her a lot. I'm not sure she's ever really won the whole thing, but she comes close every year. And people who watch that every time, they feel like, they don't know her, but they have a connection with her. And I think sometimes we tend to do that a lot with sports personalities that we tend to like and tend to sometimes identify with. It's an easy thing to do. The agenda setting and framing theory. This is where the media attempts to manipulate the consumer consumer thinking with carefully chosen messages. There's a basketball brand called The Rock, and I remember my first exposure to that was when I was an AD at Northwest Nazarene. One of the schools in our conference was Alaska Anchorage, and you may have seen in the past they have this thing called the Great Alaskan Shootout that was held on their campus, and they had this deal with The Rock, and that was the official ball for that. And so we had a big discussion within the conference in regard to, do we all adopt The Rock because Anchorage is using it. And it was a kind of a controversial discussion. But when you see ads out there, like for example, an ad from the NAIA, and they show a ball and it says Spalding or whatever. Well, that's one of the ways that they are trying to set this agenda. As a matter of fact, most conferences will adopt a ball. Anybody know why they do that? I don't know what ball. Anybody here know what ball the conference, the MVNU is involved in, has adopted either in volleyball or basketball? Anybody know? I'm sure they have adopted some ball. Anybody know why that is? Why would a conference adopt a particular ball? Everybody's using the same one in practice, exactly. You don't want to be using a Spalding and then you get there and they're using a McGregor. You think, well, a ball is a ball. No, it's not. And so that's why conferences will adopt balls. And then when they do that, the nice thing is every school gets about 10 basketballs. And so you get to practice with them that way. You have the modeling and cultivation theory, where the media targets younger kids, impressionistic kids. Television programming in general tells consistent and repetitive stories across different types of content. Oh, there was a reality show, I don't know if it's still on or not, it was called Little Tykes Football or something like that. And it was like Pee Wee football, and they concentrated on this one league or this one team, and they showed how some of these little kids were being, yelled at, and they just were asked to grow up too quickly in football. And so, can you imagine if you're that age and you're watching and you're thinking, man, apparently it's okay to do that. And so that's this sport communication theory that kind of perpetrates that idea. Well, let's go back to the model, the strategic sport communication model. This is what we started with. Well, on the first day I alluded to it. This relies on structure and process. Structurally, it's based on 3 primary components, and those are these here, 1, 2, and 3. But it also illustrates a process of communication between those. And so you've got this process arrow down here, and note that it probably would be even more descriptive if we showed this arrow pointing here as well, and this one pointing here as well, because these all are integrated. Sport is a process. It doesn't take place in a vacuum, and it's got to be played out in a context. So, and there may be a couple of slides that I added here that you don't have. It's not going to affect your learning of this material, but anyhow, I just wanted to illustrate further these components. The first one, personal and organizational communication. This is the idea, believe it or not, of talking to yourself. And I have that illustration of a halftime talk by a coach, and a lot of times it's just the coach. He or she doesn't ask for feedback, and so you're left there to think, what did, is he talking to me, or is that what she means? But you're talking to yourself inside. That's where most of the communication happens in our lives. We talk to ourselves. Now, I don't mean, when I say that, I don't mean the person that you see, the homeless person on the corner who talks to himself. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about introspection, where we are examining and thinking about the things that others have shared, the messages that people are giving us. I remember, years ago at a school I was working at, one of the players I got to know, basketball players, he was saying that at halftime at one game, head coach said to one of the other coaches, "You got anything to say?" And he said, "I got one word to say. Don't drift into the paint when blah, blah, blah." And he's sitting there. One word, that is just kind of a humorous thing, but, that's what he was thinking. And that's what the message was to him. He didn't say one word. He said 5 or 6 words, and then the message is lost. Here's the second part of personal and organizational communication, is the organization part. First of all, interorganizational, where you have, here's the example I give. In the crossover league, the league SID was a guy named Josh Newhart. He's from Grace, and you'll notice I've got the arrow pointing down to the NAI. This happens to be the NAI office in Kansas City, Kansas. There's 2 parts of Kansas City. You cross the river and you're Kansas City, Missouri. The other side is Kansas City, Kansas. And that's where the NAI offices are. But he was named the Sports Information Director of the Year. Interorganizational, communication between groups representing an umbrella type organization. So, MBNU, Grace, Indiana Wesleyan, and so forth. That would be that type of information. Okay, I thought I included another example of intra-organization. That's within, for example, within our organization here. The SID talks to the SID talks to the athletic director. That's the kind of communication within the organization. Mediated communication, this is all forms of media messages. It can be print, any kind of social media and so forth. Here's an example. A case study. Sociologist John Goldlust has suggested that the coming together of sport and TV was a match made in heaven. Many sports have changed how, when, and where they are played because of the necessities of TV. Tennis balls are yellow, for example, because that color is easier to see on TV. Monetary profit has driven many of these changes, and the popularity of sports memorabilia and media has enabled many more people to make a living from sports. When I was growing up, tennis balls were gray. All tennis balls were gray. Now, you can't find anything pretty much but yellow tennis balls because they show up on TV better. On TV, the flags that the referees throw, it's a color that shows up on TV. It didn't start out that color. TV viewership drives media communication. We pointed this out, I think last time when we were talking about viewership really wanting where you take the video replay and well, we have it, why can't we review calls? And it's one of those deals where be careful what you ask for, because it comes back to bite you in the end. You know, I wish they had done that now, you know, blah, blah, blah. So mass media convergence involves much more than one medium, and thus brings about crossover and connections between various segments. Can you think of any other, notice my question here, the above studies revealing, can you think of other ways TV coverage has changed sport and its delivery? What other ways do you think TV has changed the delivery of sport? Grant?
I mean, they stopped the game just to have a commercial break.
Say it louder.
They stopped the game just to have like commercial breaks.
Oh, yeah. Don't you love that? They stopped the game for a commercial break. If you've ever been to a Big Ten game, like an Ohio State game, and they have a timeout, there's one guy in that entire stadium that everybody has, well, if you know about it, has their eyes on, and he's down on the sideline, he's an official, and he's standing there, and he's got a watch, and they will not start the next play until he says, go. And he's communicating with the TV people, because when the last commercial is played and over, he says go, and then they start. If you've ever worked the officials table in basketball, I've done that quite a bit in the past. There are TV timeouts. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have TV coverage, and I've not been to one of your home games, but I'm fairly certain that there are TV timeouts because they'll break for radio ads, and coaches get to know that, and they won't call it their own timeout because they know there's a TV timeout coming up. Changing the game. How else has TV viewership changed delivery of sport? Any other ideas? In football, in baseball, in soccer? What about baseball? Aren't there some changes they've considered in baseball? What do they show a lot of times on just about every pitch? What do we see superimposed on the screen?
So,
Huh?
strike zone.
Strike zone, exactly. And isn't your thought, well, if they can do that, why do we rely on blue in the back? That's what they call the umpire, blue. Why do we rely on him if we can do it digitally and get it right? I don't know, frankly. It'd take a lot to get rid of umpires, my guess is, but it seems kind of silly when you've got that superimposed there and you know there's no way you can. Tennis has done it. Now they still have line judges, but they'll go to, and there's a question, they'll go to the digital replay and show exactly where that ball hit, and they can either uphold a call or change a call. Okay, do some more thinking about that while I change this. What other ways